The morning sun painted streaks of amber across Thompson Organic Farm's vast expanse, where rows of vegetables stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Marcus Thompson stood at the edge of his 2,000-acre property, breathing in the rich scent of fertile soil, the same soil his grandfather had worked with nothing but a mule and unwavering faith 7 decades ago. At 45, Marcus's hands told the story of his journey, calloused from years of working the land, yet now equally comfortable holding business contracts worth millions. He pulled out his phone, checking the time for his appointment at Elite Aviation. The thought of purchasing a private jet would have seemed like fantasy to the teenage boy who once helped his father salvage their failing 10-acre plot after the devastating drought of '93. Looking at the old barn again, Dad Maya, his youngest daughter, approached quietly. She had inherited his contemplative nature, always finding him during these early morning reflections. Marcus smiled, remembering the countless nights he'd spent in that weathered structure, poring over agricultural science books by lamplight, determined to transform their struggling family farm into something greater. "That barn taught me more than any classroom ever could," he replied, his deep voice carrying the weight of memories. "It's where I learned that sometimes you have to tear down what isn't working to build something better." And tear down he had. Where his father had fought to keep their small farm afloat growing traditional cotton and tobacco, Marcus had envisioned something different. He remembered the day he'd presented his radical proposal, converting every acre to organic production, focusing on high-demand specialty crops, and implementing cutting-edge hydroponic systems. "Your daddy would be proud," Maya said softly, understanding the significance of today's appointment. "Going from worrying about the bank taking our land to buying a private jet. That's the kind of story people need to hear." Marcus nodded, thinking about how Thompson Organic Farms had grown from those initial 10 acres to become the largest black-owned organic farming operation in the Southeast. Their produce now graced the shelves of premium grocery chains across 12 states, and their training program had helped establish over 30 other minority-owned organic farms. But today's mission wasn't about personal luxury. The Citation CJ4 would be a game-changer for their operation, allowing them to expand into perishable crops and reach markets that had previously been logistically impossible. It represented the next phase of his vision, turning Thompson Organic Farms into a nationwide enterprise that could compete with industrial agriculture giants while maintaining their commitment to sustainable practices and community development. "Time to head out," Marcus said, straightening his custom-tailored suit. He'd learned long ago that in certain circles, appearance wasn't just about vanity, it was armor. Today, he'd need every bit of that protection. Because even after all his success, he knew that walking into Elite Aviation as a black man asking to buy a $14 million jet would raise eyebrows, if not outright prejudice. Maya squeezed his arm, understanding the unspoken challenge ahead. "Show them what a Thompson is made of, Dad." Marcus smiled, his determination hardening into resolve. He'd faced doubt and discrimination at every step of his journey, from local banks that refused to provide expansion loans to suppliers who questioned his ability to pay. Each obstacle had only served to fuel his drive to succeed, not just for himself, but for every person of color who'd ever been told their dreams were too big. "Always do," he replied, heading toward his truck. Today wasn't just about buying a jet. It was about continuing to break down barriers, one achievement at a time. Marcus Thompson's connection to the land ran deeper than the roots of the heritage oak trees dotting his property. His grandfather, Isaiah Thompson, had purchased the initial 10 acres in 1953, defying the odds during an era when black land ownership was not just discouraged but often violently opposed. Isaiah had worked every inch of that soil with his children by his side, teaching them that ownership of land meant ownership of their destiny. "A Thompson always returns to the soil," Marcus's father, James, used to say. James had expanded the farm to 30 acres through sheer determination, working second jobs to keep the operation afloat during lean years. He'd insisted on sending Marcus to college despite their financial struggles, believing education would be the key to the farm's survival. Now, walking through the state-of-the-art hydroponic greenhouse where workers carefully tended to rows of organic herbs, Marcus reflected on how his father's wisdom had merged with modern innovation. Sarah Martinez, his operations manager of 15 years, fell into step beside him, tablet in hand. "The new vertical farming system is exceeding projections," Sarah reported, her excitement evident. "Production is up 40% with the same water usage. The community college students you sponsored for the agricultural tech program are picking it up faster than we expected." Marcus smiled, remembering when he'd hired Sarah fresh out of agricultural school. Everyone had questioned his decision to put a young Latina woman in charge of operations, but he'd seen in her the same hunger for innovation that drove him. "How are the apprentices doing?" "All 8 of them are thriving. Having them live on the property in the new housing units was genius. They're treating the crops like their own children." Sarah's voice softened. "You know, Mr. Thompson, my father still talks about how you gave our family a chance when no other farm would hire Mexican workers for management positions." The Thompson family now extended far beyond blood relations. Besides his wife Patricia, a brilliant environmental lawyer who'd helped navigate the complex world of organic certification, and their 3 children Maya, James Jr., and Aisha, Marcus had created a family of choice among his employees. There was Uncle Ray, a 70-year-old former sharecropper who'd taught Marcus more about soil composition than any textbook. Despite officially retiring 5 years ago, he still showed up every morning to mentor the new generation of farmers. Dr. Chen, their resident plant pathologist, had left a prestigious university position to help develop Thompson Farm's innovative organic pest control methods. And Malik, a former gang member who discovered his passion for agriculture through the farm's youth rehabilitation program, now managed their largest greenhouse complex. Marcus's business acumen had turned Thompson Organic Farms into a case study taught at leading business schools. By vertically integrating operations from seed development to distribution, he'd created an enterprise that generated over $50 million in annual revenue. But his true pride lay in the farm's impact on the community. The Thompson Agricultural Education Center, established in partnership with local schools, provided hands-on training in sustainable farming practices. Their Fresh Start program offered employment and housing to formerly incarcerated individuals, boasting a recidivism rate near 0. The farm's mobile markets brought fresh organic produce to food deserts throughout the region, accepting SNAP benefits and offering subsidized prices to low-income families. Patricia often joked that Marcus treated the farm's profit and loss statements like secondary concerns compared to their community impact metrics. But his approach had proven prophetic. By investing in people and sustainability, Thompson Organic Farms had built a brand that commanded premium prices and inspired fierce customer loyalty. "Your daddy used to say you had dirt in your veins and stars in your eyes," Uncle Ray would remind him. "Turns out that's exactly what we needed, someone who could keep their roots deep while reaching for something bigger." As Marcus headed to his office to prepare for the meeting at Elite Aviation, he passed the wall of family photos in the main building. 4 generations of Thompsons looked back at him, from Isaiah's weathered face to his own children's bright smiles. The jet would be another tool to expand their impact, another way to prove that success meant nothing if it wasn't shared. Elite Aviation's headquarters rose from the landscape like a crystal palace, its glass and steel facade reflecting the morning sun. Marcus Thompson pulled his Ford F-150 into the curved driveway, passing a row of luxury vehicles that probably cost more than his first tractor. The truck wasn't flashy, but it was reliable, like everything else he'd built his success upon. As he approached the designated VIP parking area, a security guard stepped out of his booth, hand resting unnecessarily on his holster. Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest, not fear, but the weight of centuries of assumptions he'd have to disprove yet again. "Sir, this area is restricted to clients only," the guard announced, emphasizing clients with unmistakable skepticism. His eyes darted between Marcus's face and his truck, making calculations that had nothing to do with security protocols. Marcus maintained his calm demeanor, perfected through years of similar encounters. "Good morning. I have a 10 a.m. appointment with Mr. Davidson regarding the citation CJ4. Marcus Thompson." The guard's expression flickered between doubt and confusion as he radioed in the information. Marcus used the moment to adjust his tie, catching his reflection in the truck's window. The suit was Tom Ford, the watch was Patek Philippe, and his posture was straight as the rows of organic kale that had helped build his empire. He'd learned long ago that in spaces like this, appearance wasn't just about vanity, it was about survival. "Wait here," the guard instructed, his tone making it clear he expected verification to fail. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see movement staff members looking out, whispering, pointing. He'd seen it all before, the subtle choreography of Prejudice dressed up as procedure. After what felt like an intentionally long wait, the guard returned with a plastic visitor badge. "Park in spot B3, he said curtly. Not meeting Marcus's eyes. "Someone will escort you inside." Inside the dealership's atrium, the space breathed wealth and exclusivity. A scale model of a Gulfstream G650 rotated slowly on a pedestal, while massive screens displayed various private jets in flight. The floor was polished to mirror shine, reflecting the crystal chandeliers above. Two employees behind the reception desk whispered to each other as he approached, their eyes widening slightly. The younger one quickly tapped something into her phone, while the older woman plastered on a practiced smile. "Welcome to Elite Aviation," she said, her tone carrying that particular note of forced politeness Marcus had learned to recognize. "How may we assist you today?" "Marcus Thompson, here for my appointment with Mr. Davidson about the Citation CJ4. The receptionist's fingers hovered over her keyboard. "I'm sorry, are you representing someone?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice steady. "No, I'm here as a potential buyer. The appointment should be under Thompson Organic Farms." More tapping, more side glances. A young sales associate approached Jessica Chen, according to her nameplate. Unlike the others, her smile seemed genuine. "Mr. Thompson? I've been reviewing your interest in the CJ4. Would you like to start with a tour of our showroom while we wait for Mr. Davidson?" Before Marcus could respond, an older white man in an expensive suit interrupted, placing himself between Marcus and Jessica. "Chen, I'll handle this." Situation. He turned to Marcus with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Bradley Winston, Senior Sales Manager. Perhaps we should discuss some more appropriate options. We have excellent relationships with several charter companies." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke, toxic, but difficult to grasp. Marcus felt the familiar battle within himself, the desire to respond with justified anger versus the calculated calm that experience had taught him was necessary. He thought of his grandfather, of all the times Isaiah Thompson had swallowed his pride to keep their land, of his father's quiet dignity in the face of countless slights. "Mr. Winston," Marcus replied, his voice level but firm, "I appreciate your concern, but I've already completed the necessary research. The CJ4 meets my company's needs perfectly. Would you like to see my proof of funds now, or shall we wait for Mr. Davidson?" Winston's smile faltered slightly. Behind him, Jessica Chen stood straighter, a look of quiet approval crossing her face. The reception area had grown silent, other customers and staff watching the interaction with varying degrees of discomfort and curiosity. Marcus maintained eye contact with Winston, his posture relaxed but commanding. He'd faced down bank managers who didn't believe in organic farming, suppliers who demanded payment up front because of his skin color, and competitors who'd tried to undermine him at every turn. This was just another moment in a lifetime of moments, another opportunity to show that dignity couldn't be diminished by ignorance. "Bradley Winston," I gestured toward a small conference room off the main showroom, his movements carrying the practiced smoothness of someone accustomed to controlling situations. "Let's discuss you. Interest somewhere more private, shall we?" Marcus noticed Jessica Chen discreetly pull out her phone, angling it to capture their interaction. Smart girl. He followed Winston into the room, maintaining the careful distance he'd learned to keep in spaces like this, close enough to engage, far enough to not appear threatening. "Now then," Winston began, not offering Marcus a seat, "I understand you're interested in private aviation, but the Citation CJ4 is a sophisticated aircraft requiring significant expertise and resources to maintain. Our typical clients have extensive business operations requiring rapid transportation of time-sensitive cargo," Marcus interrupted smoothly, "generate annual revenues exceeding $50 million, maintain relationships with major national retailers, because Thompson Organic Farms checks all those boxes, Mr. Winston." Winston's smile tightened. "I'm sure your farm operation is quite successful in its own way. However, the CJ4 represents a significant investment. The maintenance alone costs approximately $850,000 annually, not including fuel costs and hangar fees." Marcus finished. "The operating cost per flight hour averages $2,600. The aircraft requires a type-rated pilot, which I am, and undergoes mandatory inspections every 3,000 flight hours or 36 months, whichever comes first." A flash of surprise crossed Winston's face before he recovered. "You've done your homework, Mr. Thompson. But understanding specifications is different from having the necessary background to operate in this sphere." Jessica Chen chose that moment to enter, carrying a tablet. "Excuse me, Mr. Winston, but I have Mr. Thompson's file ready." She turned to Marcus. "Sir, I took the liberty of preparing a comparison analysis of the CJ-4 against similar aircraft in its class, specifically focusing on cargo capacity and range requirements for perishable agricultural goods." Winston shot her a warning look. "Chen, I believe I made it clear that we should provide our clients with comprehensive information." She finished, her voice professionally pleasant but firm. "I also have Mr. Thompson's proof of funds and the pre-approval from aviation finance partners ready for review." Marcus watched the dynamic with interest. Jessica Chen was young, probably fresh out of business school, but she carried herself with quiet determination. He recognized in her the same fire he'd had as a young farmer, fighting to be taken seriously in an industry that wasn't ready for change. "That won't be necessary," Winston said sharply. "Mr. Thompson was just about to explore our charter options, weren't you?" Marcus pulled out his phone, opening his banking app. "Actually, I was about to question whether Elite Aviation's discriminatory practices extend to all potential clients, or if I'm receiving special treatment today." He turned the phone toward Winston, displaying an account balance with significantly more zeros than the cost of a CJ-4. The color drained from Winston's face. "Now, let's not make accusations." "I'm not making accusations, Mr. Winston. I'm stating facts. Since entering your dealership, I've been questioned by security despite having an appointment, asked if I was representing someone by your receptionist, and repeatedly directed toward lower cost options without any discussion of my actual needs or qualifications. MS. Chen is the only person who has treated me like a legitimate client." Jessica stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson is correct. I've documented several instances of differential treatment since his arrival." She held up her phone. "The security footage will confirm this, as will the witnesses in the showroom." Winston's demeanor shifted instantly, panic replacing condescension. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding. Of course, we'd be happy to show you the CJ-4. The misunderstanding," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of countless similar conversations, "is that you assumed the color of my skin determined the contents of my bank account or my aviation expertise. That's not just poor business practice, Mr. Winston, it's a liability for your company." The room fell silent. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see other employees and customers watching, some recording with their phones. This moment would spread through social media within hours, he knew. Another viral example of prejudice in high-end retail, another hashtag, another news cycle. Jessica cleared her throat. "Mr. Thompson, would you like me to contact Mr. Davidson directly? As the owner, he should be aware of this situation." Marcus nodded, maintaining eye contact with Winston. "I would appreciate that, MS Chen. And I'd like you to be my point of contact moving forward. You've demonstrated the professionalism I expect when making a $14 million purchase." Winston's face contorted. "Now see here." "No, Mr. Winston," Marcus interrupted, his voice firm but controlled. "I believe we're done seeing things your way. It's time for Elite Aviation to see things differently, starting with how you treat potential clients who don't fit your preconceptions." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, but Marcus stood perfectly still, his posture relaxed but dignified. He'd turned similar moments into opportunities throughout his career. This one would be no different. Behind him, he could hear Jessica making a call, her voice crisp and professional as she explained the situation to her superior. Change, he knew, often started with small acts of courage like hers. Richard Davidson's arrival in the conference room carried the weight of 40 years in luxury aviation sales. His tailored suit and silver hair projected authority, but his eyes showed concern as he surveyed the tense scene before him. "Mr. Thompson," Davidson said, extending his hand. "I apologize for not being here to greet you personally. I understand there's been some confusion about your interest in the Citation CJ-4. Before Marcus could respond, Winston interjected. "Sir, I was simply explaining our typical client profile." Bradley Davidson cut him off sharply. "I don't recall asking for your input." He turned back to Marcus. "Please, continue." Marcus stood, matching Davidson's professional demeanor. "Mr. Davidson, I came here today prepared to purchase a Citation CJ-4 for my company's expanding operations. Instead, I've encountered a pattern of discriminatory behavior that raises serious questions about Elite Aviation's business practices. Jessica Chen stepped forward, tablet in hand. Sir, I've documented several incidents, including the security footage and witness statements from the showroom. Mr. Thompson was repeatedly directed toward lower-cost options without any discussion of his qualifications or financial status. Davidson's expression darkened as he reviewed the evidence. On the tablet screen, security footage showed the guard's confrontational approach, the receptionist's whispered comments, and Winston's dismissive behavior. Davidson muttered, his brow furrowing. Thompson Organic Farms, his head snapped up, recognition flooding his face. The same Thompson Organic that just secured that $100 million distribution deal with Whole Foods. Marcus nodded. The same. We're expanding our operations nationwide, hence the need for rapid transport of perishable organic produce. I'm also a certified pilot with over 2,000 flight hours, though Mr. Winston never bothered to ask about my qualifications. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Through the glass walls, dozens of phones recorded the unfolding scene. Social media was already buzzing with clips of the earlier confrontation. Mr. Thompson is also the keynote speaker at next month's National Agricultural Aviation Conference, Jessica added, her voice carrying clearly in the silent room. And his company's sustainable farming initiatives were featured in last week's Forbes. Davidson's face had grown increasingly pale. Mr. Thompson, I cannot begin to express my mortification. Elite Aviation prides itself on maintaining certain standards. Marcus interrupted quietly. Those standards seemingly include judging clients by their appearance rather than their credentials. Tell me, Mr. Davidson, how many other potential buyers have been directed to charter services before even discussing their needs? A commotion outside drew their attention. Local news vans were pulling into the parking lot, attracted by the viral social media posts. Winston's face had turned ashen. So Jessica said to Davidson, the incident is trending on Twitter. Elite discrimination and flying while black are gaining traction. Davidson loosened his tie slightly. Mr. Thompson, what would you have us do to make this right? Marcus stood, his presence commanding the room. What I want is systemic change, Mr. Davidson. This isn't about me, it's about every person of color who walks through these doors. It's about the message you send to the next generation of pilots, entrepreneurs, and business leaders who don't fit your preconceptions of success. He gestured to Jessica. Ms. Chen here showed professionalism and integrity when others displayed prejudice. She should be promoted to sales manager, replacing Mr. Winston, who I believe has demonstrated his inability to serve a diverse clientele. Winston sputtered, you can't possibly. Bradley, you're suspended effective immediately. Davidson cut in. Security will escort you out. He turned back to Marcus. Please, continue. I want Elite Aviation to establish a scholarship program for minority pilots, and I want a formal commitment to diversity training for all staff, with regular audits to ensure compliance. Marcus paused. Do this, and not only will I purchase the CJ4, but I'll recommend Elite Aviation to my extensive network of agricultural and business contacts after the changes are implemented and verified. Outside, the media presence had grown. The story was spreading a successful black farmer confronting discrimination in the luxury aviation industry. But Marcus knew this moment could be more than just another viral outrage. It could be a catalyst for real change. Davidson extended his hand again. Mr. Thompson, you have my word. We'll implement every change you've suggested starting today. Ms. Chen, congratulations on your promotion to sales manager. Would you please show Mr. Thompson the CJ4 specifications while I draft a formal statement and begin the necessary paperwork? As Jessica led him toward the aircraft hangar, Marcus caught snippets of conversations from watching employees. Some looked ashamed, others thoughtful, a few resentful. Change never came easily, he knew, but it came inevitably to those willing to demand it. His phone buzzed messages from other black business owners sharing similar experiences, agricultural partners expressing support, and social justice organizations requesting interviews. This moment would have ripple effects far beyond Elite Aviation's glossy showroom. But Marcus smiled at Jessica. Now, about that CJ4's cargo capacity. By sunset, the Elite Aviation incident had exploded across social media platforms. The hashtags flying while black and Elite Discrimination trended nationwide, with video clips of Marcus Thompson's dignified confrontation garnering millions of views. Major news networks picked up the story, framing it within the broader context of discrimination in luxury markets. What makes this incident particularly compelling, CNN's aviation correspondent reported, is Mr. Thompson's strategic response. Rather than simply calling out discrimination, he's leveraging his influence to create institutional change. The story resonated far beyond the aviation industry. Black business leaders began sharing their own experiences of discrimination in high-end purchases, from real estate to luxury vehicles. Thompson's name became synonymous with graceful resistance to systemic bias. Marcus Thompson didn't just buy a jet today, wrote influential tech CEO Regina Williams in a viral Twitter thread. He opened doors for every person of color who's ever been asked, "Are you sure you're in the right place? We're forming a coalition of black business leaders to address discrimination in luxury markets." Thompson Effect. Inside Thompson Organic Farms' main office, Marcus's team worked overtime managing the flood of media requests and messages of support. Patricia, his wife, coordinated with civil rights organizations, while their PR team crafted a statement emphasizing solutions over grievances. "What happened at Elite Aviation reflects a broader issue in our society," Marcus told Anderson Cooper in a primetime interview. "But it also shows how we can transform these moments into opportunities for progress. The scholarship program we're establishing will help diversify the aviation industry from the ground up." The aviation industry took notice. Within days, competitors of Elite Aviation began announcing their own diversity initiatives. The National Business Aviation Association called an emergency meeting to discuss industry-wide reforms, with Marcus invited as the keynote speaker. Jessica Chen's role in the incident drew particular attention. Young professionals across industries praised her courage in standing up to discrimination, even at potential risk to her career. Her promotion to sales manager became a symbol of how allies could facilitate change from within. Chen demonstrated what true professional integrity looks like, Marcus stated in a LinkedIn post that went viral. She showed that standing up for what's right isn't just morally correct, it's good business. A coalition began forming organically. Black business owners, civil rights organizations, and industry leaders came together to create the Commercial Aviation Diversity Initiative (CADI). Their mission to address systemic bias in aviation and other luxury markets through education, accountability, and support for minority entrepreneurs. Environmental and social justice groups recognized the intersection of their causes with Thompson's work. His organic farming practices and community development programs aligned perfectly with their goals, adding another dimension to the conversation about access and equality. Thompson Organic Farms shows us that success and social responsibility can go hand in hand, wrote environmental activist Sarah Martinez. "This isn't just about buying a jet, it's about having the power to make our industries more equitable and sustainable." The story particularly resonated with young entrepreneurs of color. Marcus began receiving invitations to speak at business schools and industry conferences, sharing not just his experience at Elite Aviation, but his broader journey from small-scale farmer to industry leader. The most powerful response, he told his daughter Maya, reading through the thousands of messages they'd received, isn't the outrage. It's the hope. People see that change is possible when we stand our ground with dignity and purpose. Elite Aviation's transformation became a case study in corporate response to discrimination. Under pressure from the viral exposure, they didn't just implement the changes Marcus had demanded, they became industry leaders in diversity and inclusion, with Jessica Chen spearheading innovative programs for minority recruitment and training. The incident had transformed from a moment of discrimination into a movement for change, proving that sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice isn't anger, but strategic action backed by unwavering dignity. 6 months after the viral confrontation at Elite Aviation, the dealership's transformation was evident from the moment visitors stepped through its doors. Under Jessica Chen's leadership as senior sales manager, the showroom now featured a diverse staff and a wall dedicated to the Aviation Dreams Initiative, a scholarship program for aspiring pilots from underrepresented communities. "We've completely reimagined our approach to luxury aviation sales," Jessica explained during a CNBC interview. The Thompson incident, as we now call it, showed us that excellence and diversity go hand in hand. Our sales have actually increased by 30% since implementing our new inclusive policies. The scholarship program, jointly funded by Elite Aviation and Thompson Organic Farms, had already selected its first cohort of 20 students. Each recipient would receive full flight training, mentorship, and guaranteed internship opportunities. Marcus had insisted that the program focus not just on piloting skills, but also on business acumen and leadership development. When I was learning to fly, I was often the only person of color in the room Marcus shared during the scholarship launch ceremony. These students won't just learn to pilot aircraft, they'll learn to navigate the business world with confidence and dignity. The impact rippled throughout the industry. The Commercial Aviation Diversity Initiative CADI, born from the coalition of supporters following the incident, had grown into a powerful force for change. Over 50 major aviation companies had signed its pledge for equity and inclusion, committing to concrete actions and measurable outcomes. Elite Aviation's former owner, Richard Davidson, had embraced the transformation wholeheartedly. Marcus Thompson taught us that addressing discrimination isn't just about avoiding bad publicity, it's about building a better, more profitable business model, he stated at an industry conference. Our client base has diversified, and we're reaching markets we never knew we were missing. The dealership's new approach included regular diversity training for all staff, blind review processes for client applications, and a mentorship program pairing experienced sales staff with newcomers from diverse backgrounds. Bradley Winston's dismissal had sent a clear message: discrimination was no longer acceptable in any form. Marcus's own role had evolved beyond his original vision. While Thompson Organic Farms continued to thrive, he now spent significant time working with industry leaders to implement meaningful changes. The Citation CJ4 he'd originally come to purchase had become a symbol of progress, often used to fly scholarship recipients to training programs and industry events. The jet isn't just a business tool anymore, he explained to a group of high school students during a career day event. It's a reminder that when we stand up to discrimination with dignity and purpose, we can create opportunities for generations to come. Jessica Chen's promotion had sparked its own wave of change. Young professionals across industries cited her example when speaking up against discrimination. She'd established a mentorship network for women and minorities in aviation sales, breaking down barriers that had existed for decades. What Mr. Thompson taught me, Jessica shared at a Women in Aviation conference, is that being an ally means taking active steps to create change, even when it's uncomfortable. Success isn't just about individual achievement, it's about lifting others as you rise. The Aviation Dreams initiative had expanded beyond its original scope, now including partnerships with technical schools and universities. Students who might never have considered careers in aviation were discovering new possibilities, supported by a network of mentors and advocates. This isn't just about selling aircraft, Marcus reflected during a quiet moment at his farm, watching scholarship recipients practice on flight simulators in the newly built training center. It's about showing the next generation that they belong in every space, from the cockpit to the boardroom. That's the real transformation we're creating. Elite Aviation had become a case study in corporate transformation, proving that addressing discrimination head-on could lead to both social progress and business success. The company's new slogan, "Excellence has no boundaries," reflected not just a marketing strategy, but a fundamental shift in industry culture. 1 year after the Elite Aviation incident, Marcus Thompson stood at his favorite spot on the farm, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of possibility. His Citation CJ4, gleaming on the private airstrip he'd built, represented far more than a business investment. It was a testament to perseverance, dignity, and the power of transforming discrimination into opportunity. The hardest part of progress, he told a gathering of Aviation Dreams scholarship recipients, isn't facing the initial resistance. It's maintaining the determination to create lasting change, even when the cameras stop rolling and public attention moves elsewhere. The changes sparked by that day continued to ripple through the aviation industry and beyond. But Marcus knew the work was far from complete. For every Elite Aviation that transformed its practices, there were countless other spaces where discrimination persisted in subtle and systemic ways. We've opened doors, he reflected during the scholarship program's first anniversary celebration, but opening doors isn't enough. We have to ensure they stay open, and that those who walk through them find not just access, but true belonging. His message to the next generation remained consistent: success wasn't about proving others wrong, but about proving to yourself that dignity and determination could overcome any obstacle. The The story had become larger than one farmer's encounter with discrimination. It was now a blueprint for turning moments of challenge into catalysts for change. Your legacy, he told his children, isn't measured by what you own, but by how many others you lift up along the way. That's the true measure of success. And so the work continued, one conversation, one opportunity, one changed mind at a time. The sky, as Marcus often said, wasn't the limit, it was just the beginning.